clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome back to Subway Sports Talk. Pete Kennedy here, talking NBA free agency and my 5 big takeaways for better or worse. What happened in this NBA offseason, trades, free agency, draft, all that stuff is on the table, plus a couple honorable mentions at the end. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to check out our baseball video talking all things Mets and Yankees, as well as our predictions podcast for Thor, Love, and Thunder. Find that on our page. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you know when we drop some new videos. If you're listening to the podcast app, this is smack in the middle of baseball talk with Andrew and Marvel talk with Andrew. For now, let's talk some hoops. So first things first, let me get it out of the way, and let's talk about the New York Knicks offseason. It's been the worst kept secret in basketball that Jalen Brunson was likely to sign with the New York Knicks. He did just that. We've known this for a while, but I haven't gotten my takes off on it fully just yet. So let's do it here now. Number one, Jalen Brunson to the Knicks, as well as re-signing Mitchell Robinson. Shout out the Knicks re-signing a draft pick for the first time in a very long time, as well as grabbing Isaiah Hartenstein off free agency, a nice backup center. But on Jalen Brunson, the big conversation was it too much money for the Knicks to pay for this guy who is a very good starting point guard? I think that's fair to say. Not a great starting point guard, but a very good one, and one who just played in a conference finals with the Dallas Mavericks. Is it too much money? Perhaps, in a vacuum. But unfortunately, when you're talking about free agents here, we're talking about having to pay to go get somebody. Jalen Brunson was not a returning Knicks player. He was coming from another team that would have probably loved to re-sign him for probably $7 to $8-9 million less. The Knicks had to take that free agent sticker price up a little bit to make sure they got their guy, as well as some funky fugazi stuff with the front office, with Leon Rose being very close with Rick Brunson, Jalen Brunson's dad. He was his agent, his first ever client. Rick Brunson was just hired by the Knicks now as a coach to be on the staff. Jalen Brunson's agent is Leon Rose's son, who is one of Leon Rose's son's main players who he represents. So there's a lot of intersection here on what's going on and why he ended up a Knick. But to put that aside here and talk about the money specifically, the fit specifically, and what this means for the Knicks. So the money thing, I kind of just explained a little bit, but just to say one more time, $25 million per year for a guy who will likely never make an All-NBA team is a tough pill to swallow. But there are 13 other point guards who make more money than him. And in reality, if you think about it, that's probably where he belongs on that list. It doesn't mean he's the best guy, but it definitely doesn't mean he's the worst guy. He was interesting because for the Mavericks, he was not just a floor raiser, but he did raise their ceiling at different points as well. However, his big contribution to them, in my estimation, was he was able to help them stay afloat when Luka was hurt, carry an offense, and look good doing it, frankly, with high efficiency numbers, with the ability to pass the ball, to get into the lane in a multitude of ways. As a basketball player, I don't think there's a big reason to nitpick this signing for the New York Knicks. If this was a $19 million per year deal, I think everyone would say this is an A++, great signing. The Knicks got a relevant point guard. But because the money is what it is, people get very negative and start to point out the negatives in his game and where his ceiling may end up. But when you're building a team and you've been failing to get better consistently for 20 years now, and only have had basically 2 years of truly positive runs where you felt really good about your team, this to me is a no-brainer. Getting Jalen Brunson here is a step in a good direction. Yes, it's too much money. Yes, it ties you up just a touch, but the cap is expected to go up over the next year or two and beyond when this new TV deal kicks in for the NBA. And that contract will look a lot better when somebody who's just as good, if not a little worse than Jalen Brunson, ends up with a 4-year, $32 million deal per year, right? So that whole narrative around his money being too high doesn't tell enough of the story for me. I get it that it's frustrating. We had to pay so much for a guy who's a borderline all-star at best, never going to make an All-NBA team. But when he's going to be the steadying force on an offense that has struggled for basically 2 years in a row now, who can score and get others involved, we're going to be happy we have him. He's also been durable to this point in his career. He has a strong frame for a smaller point guard who can play some defense. All these things are huge benefits for the Knicks on the court. So, yeah, I understand the money's high and it hurts. But in reality, when you need to just get better as a team, when you need to not just have a fluky 4 seed and then fall out of the playoffs, when you want to be consistent, you need to add players like this. And more often than not in the NBA, adding players like this comes at a price, especially when they're not on your team currently. As we've seen across the league with some other stuff we'll talk about in a minute here, sometimes in those trades, you throw a couple extra picks you didn't want to, or that one young piece you didn't want to get rid of, but you had to get that guy because you had to get better. You had to look at the big picture. That's exactly what the Knicks had to do here. And when Jalen Brunson is playing point guard for the Knicks this upcoming season, and him and RJ Barrett are two young guard wing type players who can score at multiple levels, who can run the offense a little bit, we're going to feel a lot better about this situation than just praying that Derrick Rose can play 60 games. So on the Brunson front, I am pro this signing. Despite his ceiling being there, despite the number being high, this is a move that makes them better instantly and could make them better in the long haul when cap flexibility opens up elsewhere and somebody wants to come play with Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett rather than coming to play with Emmanuel Quickly, who is not as good and is not the creator that Jalen Brunson is. So it's a step in the right direction, even if the number is a little higher than you want. On to my next thing. It has to be the Rudy Gobert trade. I mean, listen, this trade is crazy. It's crazy. If you just look at on NBA.com, the actual list of what went down in this trade, I'm going to pull it up for you guys on the YouTube page here too. It's nuts. Okay. And now everybody's out here dumping all over the Minnesota Timberwolves for giving up all these picks, throwing in pick swaps, throwing in more stuff than they really probably wanted to, but they felt like they had to. There's a couple of reasons why this had to happen. Similarly to the Jalen Brunson thing with paying a little bit higher price when you don't have this guy yet, you got to do it. So in this trade, you can see Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Leandro Bolmaro, Walker Kessler, the 22nd pick, Jared Vanderbilt, all went out to Utah. Also, 2023 unprotected, 2025 unprotected, 2027 unprotected, a 2026 pick swap, and a 2029 protected first round pick. It is a mouthful. They only got Rudy Gobert for all that stuff. Here's my question. What was the other path for the Timberwolves becoming a true top 4 seed in the Western Conference? What you will say as I ask that question is they need to hit on draft picks, right? But just last year, they proved that they're not a top lottery team anymore. And with Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards and the infrastructure that they were building with Finch as their coach, they're probably a play-in team at worst, right? So those picks are slightly less valuable. And now if Rudy Gobert does what Rudy Gobert has done for most of his career, which is be an incredible floor raiser throughout the regular season, this team is going to be probably at its peak in the next 2 years. And that's scary. It's exciting and scary at the same time because as Timberwolves fans are watching them throughout the season, you're probably going to feel pretty good about who you're running out on the floor. But what happens next? That's the scary part because the options become thinner and thinner when you're paying Rudy Gobert 3 years down the road over $45 million, right? That is a scary proposition to have. But same like I talked about with the Knicks, there is a Minnesota Timberwolves side of the story here as well. They don't get anybody. They only get draft picks. They only get to pick number 1, 2, or 3 when they're terrible, which has been most of the time, right? So now you have a bona fide star who people expect to keep growing in Anthony Edwards and be one of the dudes in this league. You have Karl-Anthony Towns, who's a multiple-time All-NBA center, an elite offensive player who can space the floor better than any big in the entire league, playing against the big in the league who can space the floor the worst in Rudy Gobert. So it's a good fit there. This team should be a playoff team this upcoming season, not a play-in team, a playoff team. And when you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, that might be enough of a price to pay to get somebody who can make an all NBA team on your roster. The playoff struggles are well noted. The limitations of Rudy Gobert are talked about ad nauseum. The personality of Rudy Gobert is talked about a good deal and not in a positive manner. But this guy was willing to go there. This guy was willing to stay there. Not that he had that much of a choice, but he was, and he is. And there's a realm of possibility where the Timberwolves take this one running and actually are a competitive team in the Western Conference that's going to be very good next year. Are they a top 4 seed next year? I don't think so. But I do think they're in that 5 through 7, 8 range, which is a upgrade from where they've been for basically most of their history. So all in all, they gave up too much. All those unprotected picks is going to bite them in the ass at some point. And if they don't, the pick swap will. Something will happen where those picks hurt. And Utah has a pick they really need or really want. When you're the Timberwolves, you got to get better. You got to get stars. And I don't know if he's that dude, Rudy Gobert. He's probably not. But this is a guy that they will not get otherwise. And if you said to them, oh, next year you're picking 12, you pick a guy like Rudy Gobert, that's an absolute win. Next year you're picking 7, you get a guy like Rudy Gobert, absolute win, right? They'll have the picks in the off years. They gave up a bunch. But right now, for the Timberwolves being a relevant franchise, this move is not quite as bad as people are making it out to seem. On to my third take of the NBA offseason free agency fiasco stuff that's been going on. I'm talking about Zion Williamson, who signs the full max with the Pelicans to stay there. This one feels like a cop-out. It feels too easy. But let me just tell you this. If you're the Pelicans, you got to do this every single time, twice on Sunday, the whole 9. If Zion is on your team and wants to commit, you do so, right? Because when he plays, he's freaking awesome. He hasn't done it much yet, but when he does, he's freaking awesome. And this team has shown some friskiness ever since getting CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram taking over. They don't have a bad team. And if Zion could actually play, there's an argument for this team to be in that 5 through 9 range, just like Minnesota. And that's not the be all end all. That's not the goal for every single person, for every single franchise. However, for New Orleans, you do it 10 times out of 10. You need Zion. You go for it. And guess what? If Zion shows he can be healthy and then all of a sudden he wants out, fantastic. When he's healthy, his trade value is going to be through the roof because right now his trade value is at an all-time low. So if you're one of these people who are going out here saying you should trade him, don't sign him to the extension, sign and trade, get rid of him, get what you can now. You ain't getting what you need to on a Zion trade right now. But if he can come back and play, his trade value skyrockets. And if he plays on your team's value skyrockets. This is a franchise that would legitimately be possibly moved out of New Orleans if Zion left, if Zion didn't sign the extension, if they let him walk for nothing, if they traded a crappy package for him. See you later, New Orleans. You go into Seattle, right? Like that's a real possibility for a franchise like this. And that's why the Zion extension is a no-brainer. You do it 12 times out of 10. All right, on to my next NBA take, number 4 here. It's a combo action, and it's 2 teams that kind of just don't really do it exactly the same, and it's been working out in opposite ways. The Warriors and the Portland Trailblazers have franchise cornerstones. Steph Curry, Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard has been fantastic in his career. He has been one of the best players in the league since he's been in the league. Fair to say. All NBAs. Took him a while to finally crack the all-star consistency, but whatever. We got there. Big shots, big moments, loved by the entire city, loved by the entire league in general. But they go out and they trade for Jeremy Grant. They go out and they sign Gary Payton II. They go out and they get Anthony Simons to a big-time $100 million extension. They retain Yusuf Nurkic. On the other hand, the Warriors, they let Gary Payton II walk. And they sign in Dante DiVincenzo. And they have young guys waiting in the wings like Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga. And I don't know if it all comes back to Steph versus Dame or this front office versus that front office, this market versus that market. But these are two teams with not completely different setups, and they've handled it differently. Portland has been getting their guys, or so they thought, and holding on to them. They finally traded CJ last year to tank it up and get that pick, which ended up to be Shaedon Sharpe, a high-risk pick who can turn out to be a high reward. Whereas Golden State has created an infrastructure where they develop players as good as anybody in the league. They find players to fit roles better than anyone in the league, and they really let people fly and flourish in those roles. It's sad to see Gary Payton leave Golden State, but to pay him nearly $10 million per year for Golden State is something that truly is tough to sell. He's a limited offensive player. His energy was off the charts. I'm going to miss watching him with Golden State. But when you have Moses Moody, you have Jonathan Kuminga, you get Dante DiVincenzo, you retain Kevon Looney, that's something that makes more sense holistically. Whereas you're in Portland and you kind of know what it looks like to have Anthony Simons, Dame Lillard, and Yusuf Nurkic, where you can't really play any defense. And unless the offense is clicking on all cylinders and no one's been healthy for the past 2 years for them, what's the end goal? Is the end goal for Portland just to ride it out with Dame Lillard and, give him his best shot possible? Maybe he makes a couple more second rounds. Again, maybe that is the case. And it's an unfortunate case for a player and a franchise that has been loved by many over the past 10 years and throughout Damian Lillard's tenure. But when you have the infrastructure the Golden State Warriors have, you have the confidence then to turn down one of those returning players, to say, we love you, but we have to say goodbye because we have other options to fill your role. We can't overpay you. We can't do it. We won't allow ourselves to do it. And it's a thing that good franchises do consistently and bad franchises mess up consistently. If you think about all the LeBron James teams, they haven't been the most well-run because they're giving these contracts to buddies, to clutch clients, to old players who don't deserve it. And I'm not saying Gary Payton doesn't deserve what he got, because he pretty much does. He did really well last year for the championship Golden State Warriors. But when you can replace him, you can't overpay for him. That's what the Golden State Warriors did. It's not exactly what the Portland Trailblazers do. I love Anthony Simons as a scorer, as an option on offense. I do. I don't see a path for this team to be in a spot to be truly successful again. I see them in the same realm as the Timberwolves. I see them in the same realm as oh my gosh, I'm forgetting who I was just talking about now. Whatever, the Timberwolves, you get it. You get the point. You get what I'm saying here. So that's the dichotomy there between the Warriors and the Blazers, and how a good team continues to run good and a team that struggle continues to make struggle decisions. And that's tough because I love Dame. I love the Blazers, and I see them as a play-in team again. All right, lastly, on my fifth take here, I want to talk about Dejounte Murray to the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks with the big-time trade. Not quite as big-time as perhaps the the Rudy Gobert Jazz Timberwolves trade here, but a big one nonetheless. You get Dejounte Murray to Atlanta for a number of pieces here. You get Danilo Gallinari, who goes to the Spurs and then gets moved again to Boston. You get a first-round pick in 2023, a first-round pick in 25, pick in 27, as well as a pick swap in 26. So another big haul of picks here for the Spurs. Who knows if they're going full tank? It makes sense if they would. But let's talk about the Hawks here. Dejounte Murray is the perfect guard fit next to Trae Young. It's perfection. And here's the big if the coach is empowered and Dejounte is empowered to be what they need to be for the betterment of the team. For the betterment of the team, not for the betterment of Trae Young and his all-star selections and his hopeful All-NBA selections and his numbers and etc. Because if this team is going to win and play at the level we expected them to last year and then fell short completely, they need to be different. They need to be multiple. They can't be a one-trick pony where Trae Young is running 92 pick and rolls a game. It's not sustainable. It's never been successful, especially with a guard of his stature. And by stature, I mean his actual size. I don't mean his talent, because he's talented as hell. He has to give it up more. He has to share the wealth. And if he's going to look at Dejounte Murray and say, no, I'm still going to do it all myself on offense, this is going to be a bad trade for Atlanta. But if the coaching staff and Dejounte are empowered to be a true 1B playmaker for this team, get Trae Young off the ball, catching and shooting, get him cutting, get him running off screens, this is a win. I mean, I've said this 10 times on this podcast, probably more. Trae Young is compared to Steph Curry all the time because of the shooting range, because of the quick trigger, because of all that stuff that we saw. Even some of the passing that he does is impressive. It's just as impressive as what Steph can do as a passer. But we should not compare Trae Young to Steph Curry until he learns how to be a team offensive player and a team defensive player, for that matter, like Steph does. And now I'm not expecting him to turn into him overnight, but this has to be a step in the right direction. This has to be a way for Trae to finally see, okay, we are at our best when I get to do me a bunch and then also help off offensively and just relieve pressure for other players on my team to create. It's the true way to success. Think about the teams who are in the NBA finals and who are in even the conference finals, for that matter. You have the Mavericks, who are the lesser of the bunch. Luka is one of the exceptions of somebody who can do almost everything by himself. And even he needed Jalen Brunson to be a dude to make the conference finals. He needed Jalen Brunson to pick up the weight when he was hurt. And in reality, they're going to be at their best when Luka can be that dude most of the time and then also play off the ball, also catch and shoot, and allow other guys to cook and make their teammates better. It is truly the way to win basketball games, right? You think about the Milwaukee Bucks. Why did they lose? Because their 1B was not playing. Chris Middleton was not available for them in that Celtics series. And if he was, we can be looking at a completely different NBA playoffs right here. Giannis is amazing. He's a number 1, 2, or 3 player in the NBA. And he cannot do it alone. He cannot close out games consistently without a Chris Middleton. He cannot carry his team's offense enough consistently without Chris Middleton in the biggest moments. Same thing goes for Miami. Jimmy Butler was a man possessed in a bunch of those games against Boston in the conference finals. Guess what? Tyler Hero wasn't doing it. The offense looked bad. Bam Adebayo looked a little bit not quite ready for the offensive spotlight. It wasn't there. Butler needed another dude. And on Boston's front, when did we think they were at their best? When Smart was being a good point guard, when Brown was scoring, and Jason Tatum was Jason Tatum. But this idea of Tatum being a 30-shot game guy who's taking ISO step backs and post-up fadeaways consistently all the time exclusively, it's not their peak. And obviously, I just talked about Steph Curry and the Warriors. Same thing goes for them. Steph Curry is the most selfless player in the NBA. Watch this man come up the court. He has a chance to get into a pick and roll right away and probably make a much more easier way to get to 25 points a game for himself if he took more of those opportunities. But consistently, he gives it up and runs around, gets off screens. It creates lanes for other people constantly. You know, we talk about screen assist with Rudy Gobert all the time. I don't know the numbers on this, but when I watch the Warriors, I see Steph Curry, he's getting screened, right? Like someone's screening for him, but he's actually getting the screen assist because it's a back cut for Clay. It's a back cut for GP2. It's a back cut for Andrew Wiggins. Those things have to be done by Trae Young. If they're not, they'll never reach their peak. So many people say Steph Curry ruined the NBA for the shooting, and kids these days, they're going out there, they're just chucking up threes. That may be true, but I ain't blaming Steph Curry, because anybody who says that he ruined the game, anybody who says, oh, I shoot threes because that's what Steph Curry does, they ain't watching him close enough, because he's the most cerebral player at his position. He is the great passer. He's the best shooter. He's a good finisher inside. He's an amazing free throw shooter. He's a great teammate. So if you say, oh, the NBA is ruined because Steph shot too many threes, well, the NBA ruined itself. They played themselves, because if they were watching more closely, there'd be a lot more running off screens, a lot more passing, a lot more sharing the sugar and spreading the wealth than just jacking up 9 threes a game. That's what Steph Curry does. That's what Trae Young needs to do. So those are my 5 takes. I got some honorable mentions for you, though. I do love what the Sixers are doing here. The Sixers bring in PJ Tucker, toughness. I know the deal is a little tough, but guess what? The window's open here for Philadelphia for 1-2 more years, maybe. Right now, how they're constituted right now, you got to go for it. You got to send it. D'Anthony Melton, another great signing for the Sixers. I know the Harden stuff is very sticky right now. It's very tricky, but I like what they're doing in general to give support to Harden and Maxey and Embiid, and Melton's a good player. And PJ Tucker will play a great role with them. He's obviously familiar with James Harden. Him going there must show that he has some sort of respect for James Harden still, as other people lose their respect. I like what the Sixers are doing. Onto the Suns. Don't love as much what the Suns are doing. We're talking about championship windows here. And I got to be honest, I was nervous about this championship window last year, and I am more nervous about it now. Because, yes, they were the number 1 team in the NBA last year, undoubtedly. They got banged up. They got beat in the playoffs. Where did they go from there is the question. How do they get back to being the number 1 team in the West again, as the Clippers get healthier, as the Warriors stay the Warriors, as the Nuggets get healthier, as all these teams get better and grow? Have the Suns done the same? Damian Lee, Bismack Biyombo, Josh Okogie. That's the signings for the Phoenix Suns this offseason. That's it. And DeAndre Ayton ain't coming back. Perhaps, maybe he will. We'll see what happens. JaVale McGee ain't coming back. He's off to Dallas. Where's this window at right now? Is it this much open? Is it just hanging on by the thread of Chris Paul's shoulder, hamstring, wrist, thumb, and whatever the hell else he's hurt over the past couple years? Is it hanging open at all? Can you fathom the Suns getting to the NBA Finals? I think this is a situation that can go sour much faster than people want to think it can, because we had this great feeling about them last year. They were awesome. They were the favorites for a reason. They fell short for reasons, whatever. Now, if this goes bad with Chris Paul and his health doesn't stay true, this can get bad quick. This can become a team that's fighting for their play-in lives sooner than later. Right now, I still think they're expected to be a playoff team this year upcoming. But you get a Chris Paul injury, you get no DeAndre Ayton back, you get an inconsistent offensive Mikal Bridges, and Devin Booker's on an island again. And they may have broken through from being a bottom-tier team in the West 100%. They're obviously not looking back to that right now. But if the Chris Paul thing don't work out over the next 2 years, and Devin Booker's on an island, getting no respect again because his teams lose him, this can be ugly in Phoenix before we know it. On to 2 last honorable mentions here. Malcolm Brogdon traded to the Boston Celtics. As a basketball fit, I freaking love this. Malcolm Brogdon's a great player. Would have loved to have him on the Knicks in a certain world, the world where I don't want him is probably the one we're currently in, though, unfortunately, because of the injuries, because he's played less and less games every year since his rookie year. But when he's playing, he's a really good player, man. He's 20 points, 19 points. He's a bunch of assists. He's rebounds. He's free throws. He's the whole package as a point guard. On the court, this is a home run for the Boston Celtics, who need more ball handling, who need more people who can attack the rim. And boy, can he shoot off the catch, right? So Tatum's cooking, Brown's cooking, Smart's cooking, whoever's cooking for the Derek White's cooking, whoever's cooking for the Celtics, Horford, right? You found Malcolm Brogdon in the corner. You love that shot. You love your chances right there. Can he stay healthy is the only question there. As a basketball fit, it's a no-brainer, a risk the Celtics were willing to take, and I totally get why they would do it for a pretty low price nonetheless. And lastly, my last honorable mention, Bruce Brown. All you Nets fans out there, you know Bruce Brown pretty damn well. Good cutter, good short roll man, great energy guy, hits the boards, a little short, even though he's basically a center power forward. I don't know what the hell position he is, but guess what he's going to do? Catch many passes from Nikola Jokic in the corner, in the low post, in the middle of the court, where he gets easy layups because he's playing with the best passer in the NBA. So Bruce Brown, more minor, but just a little shout out there as the Denver Nuggets get healthy, hopefully with Jamal Murray. and Michael Porter Jr. and the 2-time rating MVP. I think this team has some juice this year. I cannot wait to watch them. And this little signing for them with Bruce Brown just feels really good because they need people to play off Jokic. And Bruce Brown knows his role. He knows what he's supposed to do. It's catch passes, finish, play hard, rebound, play defense. That's it. And that's what he'll do for Denver. So that's all I got. A little bit longer than I wanted to, but that's okay. That tends to happen around here. If you're on the podcast, stay tuned for some Marvel talk, Thor, Love, and Thunder predictions. If you're on YouTube, click over to our other videos talking about baseball or Marvel. It's great stuff. It's a great time to be alive. Great time to be a sports fan. As always, thank you for listening. Stay tuned.